Gibraltar is both universal and local, both macroscopic and microscopic. Gibraltarians shared the global experience of the coronavirus outbreak, yet the rock's unique culture and geography shaped their distinct path through the pandemic. Gibraltar became one of the first countries on the planet to fully vaccinate its adult population. As masks are discarded, restrictions lifted, and sporting events resume, Gibraltar has become a test bed for the return to normal. History is still unfolding, but 1 year on, Gibraltarians are telling their stories of life in the bubble.
It's talking about it is tough. I can say it's also like a therapy session for me in a way, talking about it. People see the news and it's a screen. People haven't lived it, and it's tough. It's war is being, they've said it's a war, and I can understand it being a struggle, but the happiness I can bring from it is the patients that came out of this. We would clap every single one as they left. We'd just clap them and just say, you've got it and you've done it, and seeing the family pick them up as well when they could come and pick them up, that was a reward. Oh, that was, yeah.
Oh, goodness. It's been a very hard year.
The fact that we were going with a PP, that meant that when we got back, it was going to take at least half an hour to clean the whole unit.
Decontaminate all the equipment,
everything. De-donning. So everything just took very long. And obviously I remember a specific day where I had a patient that was COVID positive. My colleagues were doing a transfer back home, and my other crew was doing another job. And it was over the radio, we have a patient on dialysis with a bleed, and an allergic reaction, I believe it was. So both of them quite serious, and we were all committed on jobs. So it was a fact of, right, quick, let's get back.
Clean up as
best as you can, and right, let's go. And you think it could have ended up where it's a massive
it got a lot
disaster.
busier.
Yeah.
We had a lot of calls pending. We got to a point where we'd be handing over an A&E and you'd be getting a call, like trying to free us up so we could go to this pending call, and you were stressing out because you had to try and decontaminate as many things as possible, and obviously you would want to be safe. You're not going to go to a patient's house to help them and in the end give them a virus. So it was just like that stress in your mind all the time, making sure you're trying to decontaminate, remember what exactly was used, what wasn't used, and it was just like a bit of mayhem at one point. But it's made me realise how much I like the job now that it's not COVID related.
Even in January, I don't think anyone thought that it was that serious, or that we were going to have the consequences and repercussions that we had during the year.
It was a little bit scary initially because this was completely new for everyone. So we were learning how to treat these patients, how to look after them. Also, most of the people on the wards had come from somewhere else. So we also had to learn to work together as a team.
I think at the time we were thinking like everybody else. It's not going to come here, it's not going to come here.
But you know, it's been such a strange year that sometimes you actually forget how hard it's been for the last year.
Okay, you've got to remember, you know, this is a respiratory virus and we're such a small place. And, you know, we're such a close-knit community that anything with a respiratory virus is worrying because it would spread quite quickly.
People don't realise, they don't understand how vital oxygen has been in this pandemic. The first wave not having such a big impact allowed us to get a lot more equipment in at short notice before everything became impossible to source.
I was scared, no? Especially when the doctors, so they're my colleagues, and especially the intensivists, they sat us down and they said, We're seeing many cases in other countries. I have friends who are advising me to be aware and to be prepared for the wave when it comes.
Some were from outside the UK. We had some English nurses, some Spanish nurses, a couple of local ones, so we didn't know each other. So it was, for the first couple of weeks, it was a really big period of learning, and you felt as if you were drowning a little bit the first couple of weeks.
Getting dressed, and they say like when paratroopers, when they jump out of a plane, they prepare the parachute almost like a ritual. It became like that when we were putting on our equipment every single time we went in.
We knew we had to train. We trained frontline people first, like A&E, the ambulance staff, ITU, because we knew if we would get anyone in, you know, that it was going to be like through there.
All the
so we had to
training
train
on
them
hand
first.
hygiene, personal protective equipment,
decontamination,
fit testing.
Because it was getting to know everybody, working out a system where, because we had to wear the full PPE, so we had to take turns to go in to sit with our patients. We also had to learn how to use the new high flow oxygen machines. I'd never used that before. So that was another different thing. So yes, for the first 2 weeks it was really, really hard. We had a very good manager on the ward who pulled everything together and made sure that everybody was supported and had the proper learning.
But people were working shifts and shifts beyond shifts. There were people going into work at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning and working till 2 in the morning.
Because it's just going to hit you suddenly. And a matter of fact, that's what happened to Gibraltar. We were fine one day, and then within a period of 3 days, the ICU was full. Everyone, so many cases of COVID, and we just had to work. And it was 12 and a half hour shifts of us going in there and maybe only leaving for half an hour or an hour. Sorry. Very scary.
And the thing about COVID, which the news say that, oh, they're suffocating. And the scary thing is when we check the oxygen saturation, the percentage of oxygen in their blood, the number, it was nothing like what a textbook would say. They would be on the floor. They would have really bad, they didn't have enough oxygen in their body. But physically, at least at the beginning, you would say they looked fine. They looked fine. They were a little bit short of breath. I remember there was this old lady that the oxygen was on the floor. Maximum, we were providing as much as we could. And I was with the doctor, and we told her, there's nothing, I'm really sorry, we can't do anything more. And she asked us, but why? I feel fine. I feel a bit short of breath and I can't get out of bed, but I feel okay. And that's what, it's hard because it kept reoccurring with our patients. They just didn't understand. They felt fine. And we on the medical view were like, I know you feel fine, but there will reach a point where, and it would happen. Close the curtains for now. We really need to, let's focus on the ones which are with us at the moment, and we'll get him ready, we'll get him out when we can. But it was, and when that became a norm, that's when it was tough.
For me, it was seeing, I saw such examples of compassion and bravery that I've never seen before, and in such small things. Everyone was so terrified, so for somebody to go against that fear and do something to help somebody else had 10 times the value that it had in normal times. And there was daily examples of that, daily examples of just, you know, people helping each other with their PPE on, you know, people doing things to help patients, people not being afraid, you know, and going and seeing loved ones. For me, that was a constant light in the darkness, definitely.
It was awful. It was awful. People were very unwell. Some of them, they couldn't have visitors unless they were end of life. I mean, nearly every day somebody would pass away. Sometimes 2 people would pass away on the same day. And of course, we became a little bit invisible, I think, to patients as well, because we were wearing the full PPE. It was hard for them to identify us. saying it was hard. I remember I contracted COVID myself on the ward, probably through my own fault, because I remember taking off my glove to hold somebody's hand, which I shouldn't have done, and then I must have scratched my nose or something and caught it. So, but it was something that I couldn't help doing, because it's not the same holding somebody's hand with 2 pairs of gloves than actually holding the hand. So yes, maybe I shouldn't be saying this because I shouldn't have done it, but that was the reality. And that, I think that's why I contracted it in the end.
I've never seen nursing staff so affected by any other illness.
No.
Because okay, we see deaths and things like that, but it's occasionally 1, 2. The numbers they were seeing when we went up to ERS, the nurses were distraught.
Yeah.
They're losing, okay, their
Family.
service users, residents, whatever you want to call them, but ultimately for them it's like their grannies and granddads.
Yeah.
You see whole shifts just crying there. It's heartbreaking to be with them.
And I could see the staff at ERS working all the time to do their best to save lives.
The ERS played a major factor in the hospital not being overwhelmed.
They did.
Because from a nursing or residential home, it practically became a sort of nursing home.
A hospital.
They were treating their IV treatment and so forth. So that has helped the GHA a lot, because otherwise we would have been seeing similar sort of scenarios like those countries, beds in the middle of corridors and things like that.
And you're not only there just as a nurse. For me, nursing is it's a vocational job. You're an advocate, you're a support system for patients as well as family members, and you watch them grow. You watch them grow, and no one knows what patients live in hospitals and how scared they are. Not even the families, you know, because they all become brave and strong for them. But when you're along with them, they share some things which, you know, is close to you.
I feel on the whole the nurses in the GHA were a bit like warriors, really. And there's a lot of them that are maybe unsung heroes, you know, like some of maybe the nursing assistants who used to take turns to sit with patients.
The nursing assistants and even the cleaners, we all pitched in and did beyond what our job description did, because I think the job description didn't matter by that point. I had cleaners pitching in, helping moving patients, because they saw that we were struggling and they thought, I've done my job, and they would put on gear and help distribute the food and stuff like that. And that's when I realized that my team was amazing.
We've got an awesome team. You know, we've gone from 2 to there's 5 of us now, and you know, it's amazing. I wouldn't change it for anything. We've been through a lot, but we've also laughed a lot as
more
well.
grey
We
hairs.
fought as well,
More grey
as
hairs.
and definitely more grey hairs.
I think the way that people sort of came forward, and because a lot of people volunteered that time as well, outside to help people with their shopping, the elderly people, they'd take prescriptions for them to the home, they'd take their shopping, leave it at the door. And I think that shows how special Gibraltar is and how people rally round to help anyone.
Hundreds of Gibraltarians volunteered to help however they could. Grassroots efforts were vital in this close community. In modern times, we have become accustomed to living free from the threat of widespread disease. COVID-19 changed that. We were all impacted, but not equally. Lockdowns forced us to stay at home. The sick were mostly unseen. On the front line, those who care for and heal others bore witness to the brutal realities of the disease. Their stories are personal testaments. Both now and in the future, they will help us to understand. This coronavirus that has so upended our lives is just doing what viruses do. It is replicating and surviving. In human hosts, it thrives. Some random mutations throw up new variants that are stronger, more virulent than the last. Waves surge in different countries at different times. In 2020, Gibraltar had the virus pretty much under control. But by the end of the year, coronavirus was flourishing in the community. This second wave was vicious. Soon, there were over 4,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Gibraltar.
But obviously, because we hadn't got hit the first time, you felt a bit safer. You thought, it didn't get us last time, you know? So it was more shocking this time when it did. And then in the end, we were redeployed to different areas. I went down into John Ward, which was converted to sort of second COVID or acute. And that was the reality that I thought I was going to live in, the Nightingale, dressed head to toe in PPE all day, seeing sick patients.
The second wave came, everything had to start accelerating really, really quickly. Everything accelerated really quickly, and we had to put more and more emphasis on the systems and the upgrading.
We got to a point, there was one weekend and the ITU was full. The clean ITU that we had, which was day surgery unit that they had put into like a clean ITU, had patients, obviously non-COVID patients. Our COVID ward was full. We were moving out people from another ward to take on more COVID patients. And we got to a point that we were on the brink of turning our clean ITU into another dirty ITU. That was scary. Yeah. That was scary, because I thought, you know, if that happens, then we are really, you know, we are going to struggle. We are going to struggle. That was in the second wave.
But it was you couldn't stop it. You couldn't stop it. Once it got into the system, you couldn't stop it. That's my biggest regret. We couldn't, when we're not God, you know, but we did our best and we tried to help everybody we could.
During COVID, and particularly during those weeks that we were talking about, you know, when it really hit us, palliative care was very involved with the people dying on the ward. And I think that was in part due to the excellent work of the nurses here on the ward that recognised when people were dying and called palliative care in. And so I'd come in, full PPE, and try and provide all the comfort and all the things that we would normally do, but with a fraction of the ability to do so, you know, because all of that humanity that we use, all of that touching people's hands, talking to them, breaking bad news, you know, managing their symptoms. How can you assess people's symptoms if you can't really see them and hear them and smell them? I mean, we need to be able to smell patients, and we couldn't. I remember that was a big thing. And you know, them not being, mainly people, their main source of suffering was that their loved ones couldn't be with them. That's the main pain and suffering that we saw, and we desperately tried to relieve it.
That was quite a hard time, and I think when you're trying to educate the public, it's very hard because they're not seeing what these patients are going through, and they're not seeing the distress of families whose loved one is unwell in a hospital, but we're telling them they cannot come in and visit.
That was heartbreaking. I knew it because, entiendo, visiting time ante COVID was toda familia. Apart from seeing a relative, you saw relatives of relatives, and as much as we didn't want to, we knew that before COVID, visiting time sometimes was like a patio. You knew the patient beside, you knew this, and telling family members they couldn't come in, it was soul destroying. It was, I knew it. When they told me only one or two of them could come in, and they're like, no, but I'm the niece, but es como mi padre. Yo como puedo decir a alguien, you can't come in. You can't come in, and I had to tell them no. I had to, because we were at the worst situation ever, and they and I give it to them. They wanted to see their relative. They just wanted to hold their hand or give them a hug, and I had to be a bit cold and say, look, I'm sorry, even if you put everything on and you come in, what happens if you get it?
So you had people that would, you know, they were camping outside, you know, and they were going to come in and they were going to see their relatives. They would, you know, we saw 70-year-olds dressing in full PPE, which is, it was a heartbreaking thing to see. They couldn't even put their PPE on, but they were going to come in and see their loved one, you know.
Creo que eso era lo más duro. Sorry, it was the most difficult thing, just knowing that I knew them, and it was so difficult to maybe see a family member or having them send a message for some information or support. I think it was the most difficult part. And then unfortunately the times where we had to deal with death. We did allow for family members to come in when we knew patients were at the end of life, and obviously we were there as a support for the family. And it was very tragic and very sad, and I don't know what exact words to use to explain the feeling, but you just had to stand there and just try and not break down. But as soon as the family would leave, we would all break down. We were there for 2 months nursing these patients and hoping, giving it our all, our best, and just hoping for them to make it through. And unfortunately, when they didn't, a part of me was like, not that we failed them, because unfortunately sometimes there's so much you can do in many cases, but I did feel that in a way, their last few moments, we made it as dignified and as special or beautiful as you could imagine, and at least their family were around them. And for me, that was the best thing that the GHA did, allowing the family members to be there with them at end of life.
And yeah, you saw people that were risking their lives doing that, but then obviously they'd have to go into isolation afterwards. But
yes, they
didn't
did,
care.
but they didn't care about that.
You know, that's what I'm saying. That value was to be with their loved one at that time, and that's what they were going to do. They didn't care if they were in isolation for 21 days afterwards. You know, they were going to just be there.
See, we tried to keep in touch with the relatives on the ward. We called them as much as we could. I mean, it's not nice to be updated by phone and say, oh, you know, your loved one is becoming a little bit more unwell today, or but that was the way that we had to do. We did have iPads as well, so sometimes we could do FaceTime calls for people who were better, because people did recover. Not everybody passed away, so we did have some happy moments on the ward.
Across our planet, whatever the country, whatever the language, the pandemic sparked emotions everyone can recognise. From fear, grief and anger, to happiness, compassion and love. The impact of COVID-19 is not only physical. People who recovered from serious illness will no doubt be forever changed. The joy of their loved ones and carers brought light in dark times. And all this because of a microscopic virus that hijacks human cells.
One of our success stories, they've actually come back to the ward when things have got better, and at a distance we've shown them our faces, because they were like, I'm not leaving until I know what you look like. I've got your names, but I need to see, he said, the angels that pushed us through this. And it was nice seeing the success stories. There's quite a few, and I know that we delve on the doom and gloom, but it's nice seeing them in the streets, seeing them walking, seeing a patient which we thought, even if you make it, your whole life's going to change. And I saw this gentleman walking down the street and just thought, gosh, you're practically back to normal. You're short of a miracle, potentially, especially with some of them.
The recovery of patients, I think, was the highlight in all this experience for myself and my team. We managed to see a few patients on the wards once they were COVID-free and they were getting rehabilitated in the process of moving home. And once we saw them, the way they had grown in themselves and speaking to them about the experience, that was beautiful. I had this patient which I walked in and he told me, "La de los ojos bonito." He touched me because I thought no patient would remember any of us because we all had this huge mask and looked like little white minions walking around. And he remembered me by my eyes. And he used to tell me that I used to calm him. And I used to remember he used to blow me kisses all the time. So the fact that after a few months I walked in and he still knew who I was, I think that was the most rewarding thing in all of this pandemic. Seeing patients, something simple, telling me that they can pick up a glass and drink, that was a goal for them. Being able to be sat out in a chair for 2 hours to 3 hours at a time, that was a new goal for them. And people don't recognize how much hard work and dedication it's needed for the patients to get them back on track after they've been ventilated, after they have immobilized for such a long period of time. I think not only the nurses, physios, doctors, all the support that we had in the GHA, I can't forget to mention them all because without them, we wouldn't have done it.
When I told my team that I was going to speak, they all said the same, and they said, just tell everyone what we got through. Just tell everyone that what we've been through, and just share our message. It might not be the prettiest of messages, but it's the realistic and the reality of what it was. So hopefully I've shown everyone what we've gone through.
Now, Gibraltar is under the microscope, a test bed for the impact of community vaccination. The outcome is unknown, but there is talk of a return to normal, of hope. Gibraltarian stories of life in the bubble are part of a worldwide narrative, and that is a story that is still being written.